Just so you know, this show is about scary stuff. So don't say I didn't warn you guys. And remember, don't be scared.
Episode 42. A Very Bad Day. War Baby here with another episode of Murderous Minors. This time, we travel back to northern Kentucky in the early 90s, and a beautiful home on Tiburon Drive with a seemingly perfect family residing within. But as we have found time and time again, no family is perfect. Walter and Becky Shrout met and fell in love in college while both were attending Georgetown College. Walter went on to teach there, and although Becky was also a teacher, she soon had 3 kids to raise at home. Walter by then enjoyed a career as CEO of a local company, and the Shrout family appeared to be enjoying a fairy tale life. Son Clay Nathaniel Shrout came along in 1977, followed by daughters Kristen and Lauren. They were a typical upper-middle-class family living in suburbia. A large, stately home set deep within a vast green lawn with a huge pool in the back was where the Shrout family ended up, and all seemed well. Clay was an accomplished student with an IQ of 160 and a penchant for math. Younger sisters Kristen and Lauren were gymnasts who rode their horses in competitions. Becky was heavily involved in the kids' schools and activities, and Walter, too, was available for his children. As Clay stumbled deeper into his teenage years, his parents seemed unprepared for his rapid change from the bright kid they knew into the dark, somber kid they now had. Clay Shrout at 15 and 16 was a typical goth teen of the day, but with a sharp psychopathic edge. He wore all black, combat boots, trench coats, and similar attire. His taste in music veered toward the burgeoning alternative rock genre, along with good old heavy metal. He began to foster an interest in the occult, witchcraft, and Satanism. Clay's interest in violence, gore, and destruction grew exponentially, and before long, he was constructing pipe bombs using instructions from the anarchist cookbook. Friends also mentioned his preoccupation with bragging and stealing. Clay's once glowing report cards had been increasingly disappointing everyone involved, and the situation only worsened following a romantic breakup in December of 1993. The high school junior began exhibiting signs of depression, voicing suicidal thoughts to his friends, but even they admitted that similar dark topics did come up as normal conversation amongst the youngsters. Clay's developing obsession with violence accelerated. He began to compile a small arsenal of personal weapons, including a BB gun, brass knuckles, nunchucks, and throwing stars. As the 93-94 school year wound down, Clay could not halt his downward spiral. He last attended church on Mother's Day and went to his prom with a girl named Danielle just after, but his grades continued their rapid decline. Creative writing assignments were violent and disturbing when completed. Clay's English teacher had even called his home to let his parents know that he was now just skipping important and required assignments. Clay's trigonometry teacher reported that he'd handed a test back in, as blank as when she gave it to him. He quit his fast food job by escaping through the drive-thru window during his shift. Things were bad and got worse when Clay brought bullets and a stun gun to school. Although police weren't involved, on May 22, 1994, Clay was suspended and assigned 50 hours of community service by the school's administration. As punishment for these mounting grievances, the Shrouts had taken away Clay's driving privileges, computer, and CD collection. Kurt Cobain had only recently committed suicide, and they didn't feel like Clay's chosen music was a good influence at that point. And Clay's beloved weapons, all confiscated. The next day, he went to pick up his last paycheck and complained to his former manager that he'd gotten in trouble at school for the stun gun and wasn't allowed to drive his truck. His parents' disciplinary actions did not sit well with the now 17-year-old, and on May 24th, he had a conversation with a few classmates about whether or not a .22 caliber rifle had the capability of penetrating a human skull. He said his parents were just kind of getting in the way. Enraged that his freedom, liberties, and prized possessions had been confiscated, Clay devised a plan. He was going to gather up all of the money he could and run away. And if that plan broke down at all, he figured he would just have to kill his parents. So, on May 26, 1994, Clay Shrout put his plan into action. However, it wasn't Plan A, but B. Clay had decided his parents would definitely try to stop him. He woke to his alarm at 5 a.m., headed out to his dad's Jeep Cherokee, and retrieved the Colt .380 pistol from the glove box. Clay went directly to his parents' bedroom and shot each in the head as they lay sleeping. He then went to his 14-year-old sister Kristen Shrout's room and shot and killed her as well. As Clay went to his youngest sister's room, he heard noises coming from the master bedroom, so he went back in. His father was now perched on the edge of his bed. Clay described in his statement to police that he fired a second shot to his father's head, and then a third, as he lay crumpled. Clay then set out to find youngest sister, 12-year-old Lauren Shrout. She had woken up, and Clay led her back to her bed and shot her there. Unmoved by his own heartless actions, Clay Shrout called his friend Richard, letting him know what he'd just done. Richard recalled Clay saying that he wished it were a dream and that he could wake up. Clay dressed for school before driving his dad's Jeep to his prom date Danielle's house. She didn't attend Ryle High, and he had her with him when entering his trigonometry class, taught by Mrs. Kanabrowski. His teacher immediately wanted to know why he was late and why he had a strange girl with him in class. But as she spoke, she saw the gun and heard her students warn her as to its presence. According to Julie Zimmerman's CincinnatiMagazine.com article, Clay directed his teacher to keep reviewing for the final with the class and to lock the door because there was someone on school grounds who had killed his parents, and that someone was him. His teacher was soon weaving through desks, comforting the students as well as she could, just trying to keep everyone calm. Clay sat at her desk, dazed but in control of himself. A student randomly entered with a message from the office, and the teacher did her best to convey the situation. They were being held hostage. And it worked. The messenger headed directly to the vice principal's office as he was the administrator in charge that day. She told him that Clay Shrout was holding his math class hostage at gunpoint. There were 24 innocent people in there, and no way to know how many bullets or weapons Clay had, nor his ultimate intentions. This was still 5 years before Columbine, so school shootings as a repeated occurrence hadn't yet entered society's full consciousness. Immediately, the vice principal called the classroom and was able to covertly verify the information with the teacher. He then got on the PA system and made an announcement requesting the superintendent come to the office. This was code for staff to go into lockdown, and Clay knew this, but only because he had previously hacked into the school's computer system and stumbled across that information. Though he had only been vice principal for a year, Mr. Sorrell vividly recalled his response to being asked about situations like this when he was being interviewed. What he said then, he did now. Clay knew he'd been snitched out. He was running out of time. The vice principal had literally jumped into action and soon found himself in Clay's math class, selflessly exchanging himself for the hostages. They knew each other. He'd taught Clay math only the year before, and he was able to get the gun from Clay too just as officers arrived to defuse the situation. There were only a handful of ways this could end, and he had laid them out for Clay, who surrendered within minutes. Investigators were so relieved that no one at Ryle High School had been hurt, but were quickly appalled to hear from Clay that he'd had a very bad day and that he'd killed his entire family. Staff called Kristen's class on the 8th grade side and learned that she did not show up for school that day, though her brother clearly had. 17-year-old Clay Shrout was taken into custody, providing police with a recorded confession which included this.
I heard something in the other room where my parents were, and I went in there, and my mom was dead. I was sure of that. My dad was sitting there on the bed. He said something like, "Oh my God," something to that effect. I don't remember exactly. And I got scared when I saw him, and I fired 2 more shots at him. And after the first shot, he just kind of fell over, like flat sort of. He was just laying there, and there was a weird noise coming from him. First I thought he was like having trouble breathing, then I decided it was blood flowing out of a hole or something. And that was when I fired the second shot when he was on the ground.
He was charged with 4 counts of murder, along with miscellaneous charges related to the events at Ryle High School. But there would be no trial because Clay took a plea deal in 1995, sparing him from a potential death sentence. In exchange for pleading guilty by reason of insanity to 4 counts of murder, the other charges were dropped. A judge sentenced him to 25 years to life, with the requirement for mental health treatment. The first decade of his incarceration ended with a disciplinary infraction list totaling 29. I even saw up to 3 escape attempts reported. However, no behavioral issues occurred after 2002. Those 25 years have passed. As 2019 loomed, many who had lived through this experience felt his chances for release were good. Mrs. Kanabrowski, whose math class Clay had held hostage, did not support his release, while one of the students present that day, a woman named Marcy, did. She told Cameron Knight of the Cincinnati Examiner that she, quote, would love for him to have another chance to grow and move on. In late March 2019, a now 42-year-old Clay Shrout came up for parole for the very first time, and for the very first time, Clay Shrout was asked to explain his actions.
The board today is seeing you 4 convictions of murder, violent crime, 4 counts. You received a life sentence. You served 24 years and 8 months, and the time left remaining is yet to be determined. First, let's discuss the offenses which you were convicted of.
Well, what I did was I killed 4 human beings, and I took about 20-something more hostages. The origin of the whole thing, indirectly, is that my mother had sexually abused me when I was young. My father did find out about it at one point, but chose to ignore it, chose not to do anything about it. There's a whole lot of people that have been in the same situation that I've been in that dealt with it differently, that dealt with it better than what I did. Probably about a year or so before everybody died, I started using drugs on a regular basis. I mean, it started little, it increased. And I guess that I got to the point where things sort of popped at that moment. Because I remember feeling like a detached feeling.